So now I got my cylinder head back from the machine shop and started taking a quick look at it and looking it over, and I realized after fingering it a little bit here that I hadn't done quite as much to the ports and the bowls as I thought I had done. I guess I was remembering my old cylinder head. After that one cracked and I put this one on there, I must have been a bit more conservative than I realized in all the work I'd done to porting it and getting it ready. So I decided, well, these short side runners here, short side radius here didn't feel so great. Let me start playing with that a little bit, and I got all the carbide cutters out and the die grinder and everything, started playing a little bit. And then that led to me saying, well, I didn't do as much around these guides as I thought, so let me clean that up slightly more. Not go crazy, just a slight bit more. And then, well, I got some lumps in the sides, let me clean those out. And then set the gasket on here and realized I hadn't done as much on the ports either as I thought I had done. And before I knew it, I had 3-4 hours working on it. And now my back is going to be toast for the next few days after hunching over this thing for that long, but it is what it is. Now, is all that work actually going to make this thing perform better? It should. But we did get it skimmed slightly for flatness, and we put all new exhaust valves in it. So now that we got all new exhaust valves and had all the seats touched up, we don't really know what our chamber volume is exactly anymore. I can say that when I first put this on there, the first thing I did was had, say, 30 or 35 thousandths skimmed off of it to get the compression up on the engine. And then by the time I finished unshotting around the valves here a little bit, my combustion chamber volume was 38 cc's, give or take, I think about a quarter or less. So everything was in less than a half cc of each other. But now we don't know where it's at for sure. It should still be pretty decent, but whenever you take these off, they're always warped slightly. When you skim them, it's not going to take the same amount of material here as it does here. It'll actually take more out here. You'll be skimming here before you get to this part here completely cut. So we still got to do all that yet. I just don't know when that's going to happen exactly. It's not going to happen right now, I can tell you that, because we got other things to look at first. So the thing we're going to look at first on this is we want to make sure that now that we are putting a bigger cam in it, that we got plenty of room here, because we have cut, what, 10 or 15 off the top of the block, 35 or more off of the head, and we're going from the stock cam would have originally been 360 lift at the valve. The cam that I'm putting in it now is 401 lift at the valve. Now that's assuming that the ratio of the rocker is exactly on spec of what it's supposed to be. Usually they fall slightly short and won't give you quite as much lift. But I've got offset rocker bushings, which can then give you as much as 15 thousandths more lift. So we have to look at this in terms of, I could be seeing as much as 416 thousandths lift. And I need to make sure the cutouts and the block are deep enough to account for that now that so much has been cut off and we're only using a 40 thousandths thick gasket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all of the exhaust valves in the head, put zip ties around them to hold them in place, and we're going to put them on the block and check. Doing a quick check with my dial calipers here, checking from the head surface to the valves. I'm averaging about 340 thousandths right now. We know we have a 40 thousandths thick gasket, which means at 380 thousandths lift, I'm even with the gasket. And if we're expecting potentially as much as 415, yeah, that's going to leave us definitely below the gasket by, what is it, 25 thousandths? Something like that. So I got all of my head studs in place, and no, they're not all the way down, doesn't need to be for now. And we're not going to put the gasket on right now. We're just going to go ahead and set the head on there. And we will set a couple of nuts on it just to kind of hold everything from moving around while we check all this. So now the reason why I use zip ties here is it's easy to slide this up and down and find out how much movement we actually have. Now, it's also possible, because this thing's 60 thousandths over, rather than, say, 20 or 30 thousandths over, that it may not even hit at all, but on a 20 thousandths over block, they were definitely hitting enough to be a problem. So we can slide these things up and down, and actually, and it is barely right there. I'm just kind of touching right there. I'm just catching the bottom of it. So we need to find out how much that is. It almost completely clears because of the bore size, except for that one there. And you know, moving of the head can move slightly, but that's where we're hitting. So we need to find out how much movement is that there. And then we can figure out, is it enough? And we can adjust the eyebrows cutouts if we want to account for that. What we can use is a dial indicator here. Get this thing set up to where it's, figure out how to position this so that we're getting to the valve. And that's generally the hardest part about this, is figuring out where you're going to actually set this up to be able to measure it, but to find a spot that it'll sit. So I'll play with this for a little bit until I get it set up where we want it, and then we can actually check. All right, so I got this thing set up to where it's all the way down, bottoming out, and you know, close enough to zero. And then we lift this thing up and we count through here. It's 100, 200, 300, 400 thousandths. So we got 475 thousandths to where it's hitting at the cutout. So basically all I'm really going to have to do is clean the cutouts out enough to ensure that we're getting good airflow around them, because the extra bore size is really helping me out on this. Now the other thing to note is it's so close, like just moving the cylinder head around on the studs. Now this one's hitting and this one's hitting. And if we pull this forward all the way, this one might hit. Yeah, this one hits. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure all the other ones and see where they're at as well, just for informational sake. So after checking all of them, they're all between 470 and 480. So actual clearance issues is not a problem, but what I might want to do is actually come in here is pack the cylinders full of rags and just do some touch up around here to make them slightly better, just for airflow reasons, without going too deep. You need to stay above the top ring, and inside the gasket. So yeah, it'd been nice to know this earlier, but I didn't have the head before the short block was put together. I had originally test fitted that onto this block, which is only a 20 thousandths over block with no eyebrows, just to see what I was getting. And it was showing me that I was hitting the block before I'd ever get to my full lift, even accounting for a head gasket, which we have to add 40 thousandths to that number for the head gasket. But I definitely wanted to check it on my block just to make sure what I was actually seeing. So we take the 470 minimum lift that we had on all of these, add the head gasket thickness in, which is 40 thousandths. We know we got 510 before we actually touch anything. That's plenty of room, like, except for maybe thinking about airflow around here and if I want to do anything in that regard. But the other thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop and pick up a little bit of modeling clay. Throw a little bit of modeling clay on the top of all the cylinders and rotate the motor over just to see that dynamically how close are we actually getting to the pistons. Should be plenty of room, but I don't want to take any chances. So I guess now that we've looked at that, I'm going to go ahead and get the timing cover on it and the harmonic balancer. But one thing to note before I do that, my timing cover here, you can see right here, the seal was rubbing just a little bit on the oil slinger. I have seen these covers get bent before. I had one once that came into the shop that somebody had been restoring and somebody else had built the engine. And once I fired that thing up, it was making all kinds of racket because they had pushed the cover back into the oil seal and it was rubbing pretty hard. This one, you couldn't hear anything, at least not over my exhaust system. So I will go ahead and work this a little bit, flatten that out, bring it back out some before I put the new seal in and put it on the engine. So I got the cover straightened out, new seals in, and lubricated around here. Don't forget to put your oil slinger in. Now, there is a little F marked on there for front. It appears in my hurry to throw this together the last time when I was just doing, I may have put it on the wrong direction, and that's why it was rubbing. But put that on first. Got the gasket scooped up on both sides. It's on there. And we put it on here. Now what we'll do is I'll put all the bolts in loosely. Take the harmonic balancer, slide it on. Make sure that this thing is sitting nice and loose and on the harmonic balancer, not pulled in any direction at all. And then start tightening things down. That way you're less likely to have leaks right around the seal. All right, so now we're going to look at ceasing the combustion chambers. Now, before we actually do this, I want to take note that whenever you have a head resurface, you should go over this with a needle file and make sure that the edge is deburred properly. You want to be able to run your finger around it with reasonable pressure, not worry about getting cut. You don't want any sharp edges or burrs around there, because that can create hot spots that can make a car ping and diesel on, making it difficult to tune, especially when you're bumping the compression up and doing stuff like I'm doing. All right, so you gotta have the spark plugs in to do it, and the valves have to be in to do it. They don't have to have valve springs or anything like that on there. Now, you can go ahead and run a little bit of grease around the valve and put it in. That way you're guaranteed that you're not going to leak any of your measuring fluid out into the ports. But you can also use this as an opportunity to make sure your valves are sealing properly. One thing you can do is you can take your valve and you can take it in here and just give it a couple pops, pull it out and look, and you should see a nice line all the way around the valve. And if you see any spots where there's nothing showing, then you know your valve seal's not going to be that good, and you should use a little bit of grease on there and maybe even talk to your machinist about making it right, because it's probably going to leak. But there's a certain amount of lapping in you can do as well. But the weight of the valve itself should keep it from leaking if the valve job is done correctly and is sealing all the way around like it should. And then you need something clear, or like in my case, I got this lightly tinted polycarbonate here. That's for part of this project that you guys haven't seen yet. But I have also in the past used just CD cases. You take the CD case, I have a little belt sander, you just kind of do the edge, you know, get the edge of it off so you don't have that little ridge that's around there anymore. And then be very careful drilling the holes, because those can crack and break easy. And then you can use that. This stuff doesn't break and crack and shatter, it's easier to work with. And I just happen to have a piece, but you want 2 holes in it. And then you're going to put a little bit of grease around the outer edge of the combustion chamber, but not super thick, just enough to make sure it seals. And then put your plastic on there. Now, for the fluid, most people will say you should use kerosene or paraffin if you're from England, and you should never ever use water because it'll rust the combustion chambers up. I always use water. You know, it's only going to be in there for a few minutes, and what you do is when you suck it out of there, just immediately take your blowgun, blow it out, hit it with a little WD-40, it'll be fine. I've never had a problem with it, never had any flash rust or anything. So that's what I do, because I got water on hand all the time. Now it's a good idea, you can go down to, like here in America, Tractor Supply or some other veterinary supply place for cattle, and get you some big syringes. Preferably like these, 60 milliliters. Now I know we're ccing ahead, but a milliliter is the same thing as a cc. They're directly comparable. So yeah, if we're looking at this head, it's going to be right around 38. This head should be 39 cc from the factory. Later or earlier heads are going to be 43. This one's been sitting in my drawer for a little bit and something got thrown on it and it is now cracked. And it's the only big one I have. I have bought some smaller ones like this that are only 20 milliliters. I don't like using them, but when I was in there one time, that's all they had in stock. So I bought a few of those just because I'd rather have something than nothing in a case like this, where I want to get something done and I don't want to stop and go buy more. So you can fill this thing up with water. So this is going to be a little harder way to do it because I'm going to have to do it more than once. Just get all the air out of it. Get it up to where it's a known amount, because we're going to do 20 milliliter. We know that's at 20. And you can use barrettes and all kinds of things, but this is the cheaper and easy way to do it for most people, because you can buy these things for just a couple bucks. And fill the combustion chamber up. If you're starting with 20 milliliters each time, you know what the number is. And then you keep filling it up. One of these is for putting the liquid in, and the other one is going to be to let the air out. And you might have to even tilt the head a little bit to get the air pocket where you want it. And then once that's done, then you can actually look and see, wow, I'm showing 40 milliliter, which is more than it should have been, because this head actually checked 38 last time I did it. So evidently the valves are further down in. Now that the valve job has been done a second time, it has made my combustion chambers bigger. And that's why we check it every time, because anytime you do a valve job, it's going to change. So I'll do this to all of them, record what every single one of them is, and go from there. All right, so with each and every one of these, you can then look inside the exhaust intake ports, see if any liquid is dribbling through. Then you know you got a valve that's not sealing quite right somewhere, and then you'll have to address that. But what I've got here is I've got between 40 and 40 and a half across the board. Half cc isn't too bad. I didn't want to see 40 cc. That is going to change my calculation compressions, or my compression calculation. So instead of say 9.8 to 1, I'll be somewhere more like 9.6, 9.65, unless I were to decide to have the head skimmed a little bit more to bring the compression up more.